The black credit card slid across the glass table and stopped right in front of her trembling hands. "Take it," the man said quietly. "You have 20 hours." Aisha Brown stared at the card like it might burn her skin. Her breath caught in her throat. The room felt too quiet, too clean, too expensive for someone like her. The soft hum of the air conditioner sounded louder than her own thoughts. Across from her sat Daniel Whitmore, a billionaire whose face she had only ever seen on TV screens and magazine covers. His tailored suit looked like it cost more than everything she owned combined. His eyes, however, were tired, heavy, like they carried stories money could not fix. "You don't know me," Aisha finally whispered. "You don't know what I might do." Daniel nodded slowly. "That's exactly why I chose you." Her fingers shook as she pulled her hand back. "I can't." "You can," he said gently but firmly, "and you will. No rules, no tracking, no assistance. 20 hours from now, you return the car to me. That's it." Aisha swallowed hard. Her heart pounded as memories rushed through her mind. Empty cupboards, overdue rent notices, her 6-year-old son Malik pretending he wasn't hungry so she could eat. She had prayed for help so many times she had almost stopped believing anyone was listening. "What if I disappoint you?" she asked. Daniel leaned back in his chair, his voice breaking just slightly. "I'm already prepared for that." Her fingers finally closed around the card. And in that exact moment, neither of them knew that before the 20 hours were over, one choice Aisha would make would shatter Daniel Whitmore's heart and change both of their lives forever. But to understand how a poor single mother ended up holding a billionaire's credit card, you have to go back to where her story truly began. Aisha Brown had not always been invisible. She grew up in a small, tight-knit neighborhood on the south side of Chicago, raised by a mother who worked 2 jobs and still found time to sit beside her every night to talk about dreams. Her mother used to say, "Life will test you, Aisha, but never let it harden your heart." Aisha held on to those words when she fell in love too young, when she believed promises that were never kept, and when she found herself alone at 24, pregnant and scared, with a man who vanished the moment responsibility showed its face. Malik was born on a rainy Tuesday morning, tiny and quiet, with eyes that seemed too wise for a newborn. From that day on, Aisha promised him something she didn't know how she would keep, that he would never feel unloved, no matter how hard life became. Life, however, did not make that promise easy. By the time Alec turned 6, Aisha was working 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and serving coffee during the day. She smiled until her cheeks hurt and apologized for things that were never her fault. Every dollar was already spent before it touched her hands. Some nights, she lay awake listening to Malik breathe, wondering which bill she could delay without the lights going out or the landlord knocking again. It was on one of those nights, exhausted and defeated, that her life crossed paths with Daniel Whitmore. Daniel had not planned to be there. After another board meeting filled with numbers, arguments, and empty praise, he had told his driver to take a different route. He needed air, silence, something real. His wealth had built walls around him so thick he could no longer hear his own thoughts. That was when he saw her. Aisha stood outside a closed grocery store, her shoulders slumped, Malik asleep against her chest. A handwritten sign rested against her leg, simple and honest, "Just need food. God bless." Daniel had passed signs like that 1,000 times before. He had donated to charities, written checks, so large they barely registered as numbers anymore. Yet something about her stopped him. Maybe it was the way she whispered to her sleeping son, apologizing softly for something he couldn't hear. Maybe it was the dignity in the way she stood, refusing to sit on the cold ground. Or maybe it was a familiar ache of feeling powerless in a world that measured worth by bank accounts. "Stop the car," Daniel said suddenly. His driver hesitated but obeyed. Daniel stepped out, ignoring the chill in the air. Aisha looked up, startled, instinctively tightening her hold on Malik. "I'm not here to hurt you," Daniel said quickly. "I just wanted to help." Aisha nodded politely, the way she had learned to do to keep situations calm. "Thank you, sir. Even your words help." Daniel studied her face. "What's your name?" "Aisha." "And is?" "Malik." Daniel reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, then paused. He had done this before, handed over cash and walked away. But something inside him resisted the simplicity of that ending. "How long have you been out here?" he asked. "Since sunset." "And before that?" She hesitated. "Working." The answer landed heavy between them. Daniel didn't know why he said what came next. Maybe he was tired of quick fixes. Maybe he was chasing something he had lost long ago. "Would you come with me?" he asked. "Just to talk. Somewhere warm." Aisha's eyes widened. Every warning she had ever learned screamed at her. But then Malik stirred, coughing softly in his sleep. "Public place," she said firmly. "And I bring my son." Daniel nodded without hesitation. "Of course." That was how, an hour later, Aisha found herself sitting across from a billionaire in a quiet cafe that had already closed the public. They talked, not about money, not about business, about life, about mistakes, about how loneliness didn't care how rich or poor you were. Daniel listened more than he spoke. By the time the waiter brought their last cups of tea, Daniel had made a decision that surprised even himself. "Tomorrow," he said, "I want to run an experiment." That experiment was the black credit card now resting in Aisha's hands. "I don't want your pity," Aisha said quietly, her voice shaking as a memory replayed in her mind. "It's not pity," Daniel replied. "It's trust." She had never been trusted with anything so powerful before. That night, after Daniel arranged a hotel room for her and Malik, Aisha lay awake staring at the ceiling. The card rested on the bedside table, like a question she didn't know how to answer. 20 hours. She could pay her rent, buy food, replace Malik's torn shoes, do all the things she had dreamed about in whispered prayers. But something else tugged at her heart. "What would you do if you weren't afraid?" Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. As dawn crept through the curtains, Aisha made a decision. And that decision would be the first step toward the moment that would leave Daniel Whitmore in tears. Before the sun fully rose, Aisha picked up a card, gently kissed Malik's forehead, and stepped out into the waking city, carrying not just a billionaire's credit card, but the weight of a choice that could define her forever. She did not know that someone was already watching her. And she did not know that the 20 hours had begun counting down toward a truth neither she nor Daniel was ready to face. If this story has touched you already, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes in second chances. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from, and let us know this. If you were given that card for 20 hours, what would you do first? The city felt different in the early morning. Aisha walked slowly down the sidewalk, Malik's small hand wrapped around her finger. The sky was pale blue, the kind that looked hopeful even when life was not. Cars rushed past them. People hurried to jobs, to meetings, to lives that seemed far away from hers. The black credit card sat inside her worn purse, heavy like a secret. Malik looked up at her. "Mommy, are we going to school late today?" Aisha smiled, brushing his cheek. "Just a little late. Today is special." He nodded, trusting her completely, and that trust pressed against her heart harder than any hunger ever had. She did not rush to a store. She did not look for luxury. Instead, she stopped at a small diner near the bus stop, the kind with chipped tables and kind smells. Malik's eyes lit up when he saw pancakes on the menu. "Can I get the big one?" he asked shyly. "You can get whatever you want," Aisha said, surprising herself at how calm her voice sounded. When the bill came, her hands trembled as she slid the card across the counter. The waitress raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The card beeped softly. Approved. Aisha exhaled like she had been holding her breath for years. As they ate, Malik laughed with his mouth full, syrup on his fingers. Aisha watched him, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not joy, not relief, just a quiet moment where fear did not sit at the table with them. After breakfast, she walked Malik to school. She hugged him tighter than usual. "Be good, okay?" she said. "I always am," he replied, grinning. As she watched him disappear through the school doors, Aisha stood there longer than necessary. She knew this day was not just about spending money. It was about choosing who she wanted to be when no one was watching. She turned and walked toward the bus stop. Her first stop was not a mall. It was a housing office. The waiting room smelled like old paper and tired hope. Aisha sat across from the clerk, heart racing, as she explained her situation. Overdue rent, eviction notice, a single mother trying to hold on. The clerk barely looked up at first, but when Aisha slid the card across the desk and said, "I want to clear everything," the woman paused. "All of it?" the clerk asked. "Yes," Aisha replied. "Every dollar." The numbers were typed in. The balance showed 0. When the receipt printed, Aisha stared at it like it might disappear. No more eviction notice. No more late fees piling like stones on her chest. She stepped outside, the sun warmer now, and leaned against the building. Her knees felt weak. She could have stopped there. Anyone would have understood if she had. But Aisha didn't go home. She took the bus across town to a part of the city she avoided because it reminded her too much of what she had almost become. The women's shelter sat quietly between two old buildings. Aisha stood outside for a moment, memories rushing back. Nights she had slept in her car, praying Malik would not wake up crying. Inside, the director looked tired but kind. "What can I help you with?" the woman asked. Aisha swallowed. "I want to help you." She didn't explain where the money came from. She didn't need to. She paid for food supplies, winter coats, diapers, school bags, things she knew mattered. As she signed the receipt, the director's eyes filled with tears. "You don't know what this means," the woman whispered. Aisha shook her head gently. "I do." Hours passed quickly after that. Aisha bought groceries and filled her tiny kitchen until the shelves could barely hold any more. She replaced Malik's shoes with ones that fit. She paid for a school trip that had been sitting unpaid for months. She even bought a small used laptop so she could apply for better jobs without borrowing time from strangers. By mid-afternoon, exhaustion settled into her bones. She sat on a bench outside the school, waiting for Malik, watching parents gather in groups. That was when she noticed a man across the street. He stood near a parked car, pretending to check his phone, but his eyes kept lifting. Watching her, Aisha's stomach tightened. She told herself she was imagining things. She told herself she was tired. But when Malik ran toward her and the man stepped closer, her heart began to race. "Mommy," Malik shouted, jumping into her arms. She hugged him tightly, scanning the street. The man hesitated, then turned away, disappearing into the crowd. Aisha's hands shook. Someone was watching her. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. At home, Malik fell asleep early, full and safe. Aisha sat at the small kitchen table, spreading out receipts. She counted slowly. She had spent a lot, but there was still money left. Aisha stared at the card again. This was where temptation whispered loudest. She thought about new clothes, a better phone, things she had always needed but never allowed herself to want. Then she thought about Daniel, about his tired eyes, about the way he had said, "No rules." "Were you really testing?" she whispered into the quiet room. As evening approached, Aisha made one last decision. She picked up her phone and searched for an address she had overheard Daniel mention the night before, a place he had spoken of briefly, his voice tightening. A private care facility. Aisha stood outside the building just before sunset, Malik's hand once again in hers. The sign was clean, the walls white and silent. Inside, the receptionist looked up. "Can I help you?" Aisha nodded. "I'm here to see someone. Daniel Whitmore's father." The receptionist's expression changed slightly. Curious, cautious. "And who are you?" she asked. "A friend," Aisha said softly. "Please." They were led down a long hallway to a quiet room. An elderly man sat by the window, staring outside. His hair was thin and white, his hands trembling slightly. His eyes were distant, but when Malik stepped forward, something flickered. "Hello," Malik said politely. The man turned slowly. His eyes softened. Aisha felt tears rise without warning. She did not know why she was there, only that something inside her had pulled her to this place. As she stood there, holding her son, Aisha realized that whatever she did next would change more than just her own life. She took a deep breath and stepped closer to the man by the window. "Sir," she said gently, "my name is Aisha." The man looked at her for a long moment. Then he whispered a name she did not expect. "Daniel." Aisha's heart skipped. Behind the closed door, time seemed to pause. And somewhere across the city, Daniel Whitmore suddenly felt a tightness in his chest, like something precious was slipping out of his control. If this chapter made you think, remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. Share this story with someone who believes kindness still matters, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Now tell us honestly, would you have gone this far for a stranger, or would you have used the money differently? The old man's lips trembled as he said the name again. Daniel. Aisha felt her chest tighten. She exchanged a quick glance with Malik, who stood quietly by her side, sensing the seriousness in the room. The air felt heavy, like something fragile was about to break. "Yes," Aisha said gently, lowering herself to the man's eye level. "Daniel Whitmore is my friend." That was a lie and a truth at the same time. The old man blinked slowly, his cloudy eyes struggling to focus. Is he still angry with me?" Aisha's throat burned. She hadn't expected this. She had imagined sickness, silence, maybe confusion, but not regret, not pain spoken so plainly. "I don't think he's angry," she said carefully. "I think he's hurt." The man nodded as if that confirmed something he already knew. His hands clenched and unclenched on the armrest. "I tried," he murmured. "I tried to make him strong. I thought love was pressure." Aisha felt tears sting her eyes. She had grown up without a father, yet she recognized this pain instantly, the kind that lingers long after words are left unsaid. Malik stepped closer, tugging gently at Aisha's sleeve. "Mommy, is he lonely?" The question landed softly but powerfully. The old man looked at Malik, really looked at him, and something shifted in his face. His lips curved into a faint smile. "Yes," he said, "very lonely." Without thinking, Malik reached out and placed a small hand into the old man's shaking one. "You can hold mine," Malik said simply. "I hold my mommy's when she's sad." Aisha turned away, tears spilling freely now. The nurse standing near the door covered her mouth, eyes shining. They sat together for a while. No rush, no pressure, just quiet presence. Aisha talked softly about Malik, about life, about how people make mistakes when they're afraid to lose control. The old man listened. "I wanted Daniel to be better than me," he whispered, "but I forgot to tell him I was proud." Aisha felt the weight of his words settle deep inside her. When they finally stood to leave, the old man squeezed her hand weakly. "If you see my son, tell him I'm sorry." "I will," Aisha promised. Outside the facility, the sun had dipped low, painting the sky orange and purple. Aisha stood still for a long moment, breathing deeply. She checked the time. 16 hours had passed. 4 hours left. Her phone vibrated in her hand. Unknown number. Her heart skipped as she answered. "Hello?" "Aisha." Daniel's voice came through, tight and controlled. "Where are you?" She hesitated. "Somewhere important." "I've been trying to reach you," he said. "Someone told me you were seen at a private care facility." Her grip tightened around the phone. "I went to see your father," she said quietly. Silence. The kind that feels louder than shouting. "You had no right," Daniel finally said, his voice cracking. "That was private." "I know," Aisha replied. "And I'm sorry. But he needed someone. And so do you." Daniel exhaled sharply. "You don't understand." "I understand more than you think," she said softly. "He remembers you. He asked about you." Another pause. Longer this time. "What else did he say?" Daniel asked, barely above a whisper. "He said he's proud of you," Aisha replied, "and that he's sorry." Daniel's breath hitched. Aisha could hear it. The sound of a man trying not to break. "I didn't spend your money on myself," she continued. "Not the way you expected. But I haven't finished yet." "Where are you now?" Daniel asked. "On my way to do the last thing," she said. "Which is?" he asked. Aisha looked down at Malik, who smiled up at her. "To give you something money can't buy," she said. The line went dead. Aisha lowered the phone, her hands shaking. She did not know if Daniel would come. She did not know if he would forgive her, but she knew this much. The final 4 hours were about to change everything. As night settled over the city, Aisha held Malik's hand and walked toward the place where the truth would finally be revealed. And somewhere behind them, a familiar figure stepped out of the shadows and followed at a distance. This time, Aisha noticed. She quickened her pace, her heart pounding, because the experiment was no longer just about money. It was about trust. And trust, once broken, could never be repaired the same way again. If this chapter moved you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Share this story with someone who believes forgiveness is still possible, and tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were Daniel? Would you be angry or grateful? The night air was cooler now, carrying the smell of rain that hadn't fallen yet. Aisha felt it on her skin as she walked faster, Malik's small steps struggling to keep up. The feeling that someone was behind them would not go away. It pressed against her back like unseen fingers. "Mommy," Malik whispered, "why are we walking fast?" Aisha forced a calm smile. "Just don't let go of my hand, okay?" She turned once, just enough to confirm what her instincts already knew. The man from earlier was still there. He stayed far enough not to draw attention, pretending to be just another passerby, but his steps matched theirs too closely. Every time Aisha slowed, he slowed. Every time she crossed the street, he followed. Her heart began to pound. She ducked into a brightly lit convenience store and stood near the counter, pretending to check her phone. Malik leaned against her leg. Through the glass door, she saw the man stop outside, look around, then step back, blending into the shadows. Aisha swallowed hard. This was no coincidence. After a few minutes, she gathered herself and stepped back onto the street, choosing a busier route this time. She didn't know why someone would follow her, but the credit card in her purse suddenly felt dangerous. They finally reached their destination, a small community center with peeling paint and flickering lights. It wasn't grand. It wasn't impressive. But to Aisha, it mattered more than any luxury store ever could. Inside, the room buzzed with quiet activity. A handful of volunteers packed boxes of food. Children sat on the floor, drawing with worn crayons. The air smelled like soup and determination. A woman with tired eyes looked up. "Can I help you?" Aisha nodded. "Yes, I'd like to sponsor tonight's meals. And tomorrow's. And next week's if possible." The woman blinked. "That's a lot." "I know," Aisha said softly, "but I want to." She stepped forward, sliding the black card across the desk one more time. Approved. As volunteers began moving faster, smiles spreading across their faces, Aisha felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief that she could help. Sadness that help like this was so rare. Malik tugged at her hand. "Mommy, can I give the kids my crayons?" Aisha knelt and looked into his eyes. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "They can share." Her throat tightened. "Okay." She watched as Malik handed over the only toy he had brought with him, smiling proudly as the other children welcomed him without question. That was when Aisha felt it. The weight of the day. The exhaustion. The fear. The responsibility of holding someone else's trust. She stepped outside for air. The street was quiet now. Too quiet. She barely had time to react. A hand grabbed her arm from behind, pulling her sharply toward the alley beside the building. Aisha cried out, spinning instinctively, shielding Malik with her body. "What do you want?" she shouted. The man froze when he saw Malik. His grip loosened. "Relax," he said quickly. "I'm not here to hurt you." "Then let go." Aisha snapped. He raised his hand slowly and stepped back. "My name is Curtis. I work for Mr. Whitmore." Her stomach dropped. "Work for him?" she repeated. "Yes," Curtis said. "Security. Private." "Then why were you following me like that?" Aisha demanded. Curtis looked uncomfortable. "Because you disappeared with his card. No tracking. No rules." That scared him. Aisha laughed bitterly. So he sent you to spy on me? I asked to, Curtis said. I wanted to make sure you were safe, and that the card wasn't being used recklessly. Aisha folded her arms. Did it look reckless to you? Curtis glanced through the window at the children laughing inside, at the boxes of food being carried in. No, he admitted quietly. It didn't. Aisha took a shaky breath. Then you can tell him that. Curtis hesitated. He's already on his way. Aisha's heart skipped. Here. Yes, Curtis said. He said if this was going to end, he wanted to see it with his own eyes. Aisha nodded slowly. Part of her felt exposed. Another part felt relieved. Inside the center, Malik was laughing freely, unaware of how close fear had come to them. Aisha watched him through the window, then looked back at Curtis. I still have hours left, she said. Curtis shook his head. Time doesn't matter anymore. As if summoned by those words, headlights washed over the street. A sleek black car pulled to the curb. The door opened. Daniel Whitmore stepped out. He looked different now. His jacket was gone. His tie loosened. His face drawn and pale. His eyes found Aisha instantly. They stared at each other across the sidewalk, neither moving. Then Daniel's gaze shifted past her, through the window, and landed on the children inside, on Malik, on the boxes of food, on the quiet miracle happening in a place money usually ignored. His throat tightened. He walked closer, stopping just a few feet away from Aisha. You could have taken everything, he said softly. You could have vanished. Aisha met his eyes. I know. Why didn't you? He asked. Aisha's voice trembled. Because I know what it feels like when someone believes in you for the wrong reasons. I didn't want to prove you right. I wanted to prove something else. Daniel swallowed hard. And what's that? That kindness doesn't disappear just because people are poor, Aisha said. It just doesn't get noticed. Daniel looked away, blinking rapidly. The sound of children laughing drifted through the open door. I thought this was about money, he said quietly. Aisha shook her head. It never was. Daniel closed his eyes. For the first time that night, his shoulders sagged, like something heavy had finally fallen away. But before either of them could say more, Malik burst through the door, running straight toward Daniel. Mommy, he called. The soup smells so good. He stopped when he noticed Daniel, staring up at him with curious eyes. Are you the man who helped my mommy? Malik asked. Daniel knelt slowly, his voice barely steady. I tried to. Malik smiled. Then thank you. The words hit Daniel harder than any accusation ever could. He turned his face away, one hand covering his mouth. Aisha saw it then. The tears. But the night was not finished yet, because the final hours still held one truth Daniel had not prepared himself to face, and the card was still in Aisha's purse. Counting down. Waiting. The rain finally came. It started softly at first, a light tapping on the pavement, then grew heavier, washing the streets in silver streaks. The children inside the community center pressed their faces to windows, laughing as thunder rumbled far away. Daniel stood very still. Aisha watched him closely. For a man who controlled companies, markets, and numbers that most people could not imagine, he looked unsure what to do with his own hands. He kept flexing his fingers, as if trying to ground himself in the moment. You didn't have to come, Aisha said quietly. Daniel shook his head. I did. If this experiment meant anything, I needed to see it. He looked around again, taking in the chipped walls, the mismatched chairs, the warmth that had nothing to do with money. Curtis cleared his throat. I'll wait outside, he said, stepping back toward the car. Daniel nodded, but didn't look away from the room. Aisha hesitated, then spoke. There's something you should know. Daniel turned to her. I'm listening. She took a breath. I still haven't used all of it. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Why? Because I wasn't sure what the last part was supposed to be, she said honestly. Until now. Daniel studied her face. And now. Aisha looked through the doorway at Malik, who was sitting on the floor with other children, happily stirring soup under supervision. Now I know, she said. They sat at a small table near the wall. Daniel declined food, but Aisha insisted Malik eat. The room felt calmer with Daniel there, though no one seemed to recognize him. To the volunteers, he was just another tired man, sitting quietly. "Tell me about today," Daniel said after a while. Aisha didn't hold back. She told him about the housing office, the shelter, the groceries, the laptop. She told him about his father. At that, Daniel stiffened, but he did not interrupt. "He remembers you," Aisha said gently. "Not everything, but enough." Daniel stared at the table. "I haven't visited in months." "I know," she replied, "but it's not too late." Daniel laughed softly, without humor. "You don't know how many times I've heard that." Aisha met his eyes. "Then maybe you needed to hear it from someone who had nothing to gain." Silence settled between them again. Then Daniel asked a question she hadn't expected. "What happens after 20 hours?" he said. Aisha shrugged. "I go back to my life." Daniel frowned. "Just like that?" "Just like that," she said. "Money doesn't erase reality. It just gives you room to breathe." Daniel leaned back, studying her. "You know, when I gave you the card, I expected one of two things." "What?" Aisha asked. "Greed," he said, "or fear." "And instead?" she asked softly. "Instead, I found intention," he replied. "You spent with purpose. You saw people. That scares me more than greed." "Why?" Aisha asked. "Because it means I've been missing something all along," Daniel said. Outside, the rain grew heavier. Inside, Malik laughed loudly, causing several adults to smile. Daniel watched him for a long moment. "He's a good kid." "He had to grow up fast," Aisha said. "Life didn't give him much choice." Daniel nodded slowly. "Neither did mine." A nurse from the care facility suddenly appeared in the doorway, shaking off rain from her coat. She scanned the room, then spotted Daniel. "Mr. Whitmore," she said gently. "I'm sorry to interrupt." Daniel's posture changed instantly. "Is something wrong?" "Your father," the nurse said. "He's asking for you. He's been unusually alert tonight." Daniel's breath caught. Aisha felt her heart race. "Go," she said. "You should go." Daniel hesitated. "I don't know if I'm ready." Aisha looked at him firmly. "Neither was I for a lot of things today, but I did them anyway." Daniel stood slowly. "I'll drive you," Curtis said from the doorway. Daniel turned back to Aisha. "Will you still be here?" "Yes," she said. "We're not going anywhere tonight." He nodded, then looked at Malik. "I'll be back." Malik waved. "Okay." As Daniel walked out into the rain, Aisha felt a strange heaviness lift from the room, replaced by anticipation. Hours passed. The children were put to sleep on mats. The volunteers cleaned quietly. Malik curled up beside Aisha, his head resting against her side. She checked the time again. 3 hours left. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "He's crying, but he's talking." Aisha closed her eyes, relief washing over her. She replied with shaking fingers. "Tell him to listen. Really listen." Minutes later, another message came. "He asked me to stay." Aisha smiled through tears. She thought the night had reached its emotional peak. She was wrong, because just before midnight, the door opened again. Daniel stepped back inside. His eyes were red. His face looked older somehow. Softer. He walked straight to Aisha and sat down heavily. "I stayed," he said quietly, "for the first time in years." Aisha nodded. "That matters." Daniel swallowed hard. He said he was proud of me. The words broke him. Daniel covered his face with his hands, shoulders shaking. Aisha did not speak. She simply placed her hand gently on his arm. After a long moment, Daniel looked up at her. "There's something I haven't told you," he said. Aisha's heart skipped. "What is it?" Daniel took a deep breath. "This wasn't the first experiment," he said, "but it's the first one that didn't end the way I expected." Aisha frowned. "What do you mean?" Daniel leaned closer, his voice low. "I didn't give you that card just to see what you buy," he said. "I gave it to you to decide something that affects more than just you." Aisha's chest tightened. "Decide what?" Daniel's eyes locked onto hers. "Whether I still believe people deserve saving," he said. The weight of his words settled heavily between them. Outside, the rain slowed. Inside, the final hours began to stretch thin, and Aisha realized that whatever she chose to do next with that card would not just change her life. It would change Daniel's forever. The room felt smaller after Daniel said those words. Aisha sat very still, Malik sleeping against her side, his breathing slow and even. She adjusted her jacket around him. Buy herself a moment to think. People don't need saving, she said carefully. They need chances. Daniel nodded faintly. That's what I meant. I just didn't know how to say it without sounding arrogant. Aisha met his eyes. Money gives chances, but belief is what makes people use them well. Daniel leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I built my life proving something to a man who never knew how to say he loved me. Somewhere along the way, I stopped believing anyone else was worth the effort. And now, Aisha asked, and now I watch a woman with almost nothing change dozens of lives in one day, he said quietly, including mine. Silence followed, but it wasn't heavy this time. It was thoughtful. Aisha checked the time again. 2 hours left. She shifted Malik gently and stood. I need to step out for a bit. Daniel frowned. Is everything okay? Yes, she said. I just need to finish something. Alone. Daniel studied her face, searching for doubt or fear. He found neither. Curtis can drive you, he offered. Aisha shook her head. I'll walk. It's close. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. I trust you. Those words landed deeper than he knew. Outside, the rain had stopped. The streets glistened under streetlights, reflecting a city that never truly slept. Aisha walked carefully, her purse tied against her side, the card still inside. She stopped in front of a small storefront with faded lettering. Brown & Sons Funeral Services. Her breath caught. This was the place she had passed every day for months, praying she would never need to step inside. The place that reminded her of how thin the line was between surviving and falling apart. She pushed the door open. The man behind the desk looked up, surprised. Can I help you, ma'am? Aisha nodded. Yes, I want to set something up. For who? He asked gently. For people who don't have anyone, she said. For families who can't afford to bury their loved ones with dignity. The man's eyes softened. That's very generous. I want to create a fund, Aisha continued. Not huge, just enough so no mother has to choose between rent and saying goodbye. The paperwork took time. Signatures, decisions, amounts. When it was done, Aisha sat quietly, hands folded, heart pounding. She checked the time. 1 hour left. As she stepped back into the night, a strange calm settled over her. She had done everything she felt called to do. There was no excitement now, no fear, just peace. She walked back toward the community center slowly, replaying the day in her mind. The breakfast, the shelter, the care facility, the children's laughter, Daniel's tears. She had not spent the money trying to escape her life. She had spent it trying to face it with dignity. When she reached the center, Curtis was waiting outside. You okay? He asked. Yes, Aisha replied. I'm finished. He studied her, then nodded. He's waiting. Inside, Daniel stood the moment he saw her. You're back, he said. Aisha reached into her purse and placed a black card gently on the table between them. Daniel stared at it. There's still time, he said. You don't have to return it yet. I know, Aisha replied, but I'm done. Daniel picked up the card slowly, turning it over in his fingers. What did you do? He asked. Aisha looked him straight in the eye. I made sure people I'll never meet are treated with respect. Daniel swallowed hard. That was the last thing? He asked. Yes, she said, because it was the one thing I couldn't do for myself. Daniel sat down heavily, staring at the floor. I've spent my life afraid of dying forgotten, he said quietly. And you just taught me that being remembered has nothing to do with money. Aisha felt tears rise again, but she blinked them back. Malik stirred and sat up, rubbing his eyes. Mommy? I'm here, she said, lifting him onto her lap. Daniel watched them, something unreadable passing across his face. Your 20 hours are almost over, he said. Aisha nodded. I know. Daniel looked at the card again, then back at her. And yet, he said slowly, I feel like this is only the beginning. Aisha frowned slightly. Beginning of what? Daniel opened his mouth to answer. Then Curtis's phone rang. He listened for a moment, his expression changing. Daniel. Curtis said carefully, There's a problem. Daniel's posture stiffened. What kind of problem? Curtis glanced at Aisha, then back at Daniel. The bank flagged the last transaction, he said. Not for fraud. Then for what? Daniel asked. For attention, Curtis replied. Someone noticed. And now the story is spreading. Aisha's heart skipped. What story? She asked. Curtis exhaled. A poor single mother spending a billionaire's credit card and not on herself. Daniel closed his eyes. Outside, sirens sounded faintly in the distance. The experiment was over, but the consequences were just beginning. The sirens faded as quickly as they had appeared, leaving behind an uneasy silence. Aisha's first instinct was fear, not the loud, panicked kind, but the quiet fear she had learned over years of surviving, the kind that asked what this would cost her, what people would assume, what would be taken away next. Spreading where? Aisha asked, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. Curtis glanced at his phone again. Social media. A cashier posted something. Someone else recognized card. It didn't take long. Daniel rubbed his temples slowly. I should have known anonymity wouldn't last. I never wanted attention, Aisha said quickly. I didn't tell anyone who you were. I know, Daniel replied. This isn't on you. But the room already felt different. Exposed, like the walls had ears. Malik looked between them, confused. Mommy, are we in trouble? Aisha pulled him close. No, baby, we're okay. Daniel crouched slightly to Malik's level. You didn't do anything wrong, he said gently. Neither did your mom. Malik nodded, reassured by the calm in Daniel's voice. Curtis cleared his throat. Reporters will start calling soon, if they haven't already. Daniel straightened. Then we get ahead of it. Aisha's eyes widened. No, I don't want my face everywhere. I don't want my son dragged into this. Daniel held up his hand. I won't let that happen. I promise. How can you promise that? Aisha asked. Once people talk, they don't stop. Daniel met her gaze. Because this time, I won't hide behind silence. Aisha searched his face. She saw resolve there, and fear, and something else, respect. What does that mean? She asked. It means, Daniel said carefully, that if this story is told, it will be told right, with your consent, with your protection, or not at all. Aisha shook her head. I don't want anything in return. I know, Daniel said. That's the problem. People won't understand that. Outside, a car slowed near the curb. Curtis glanced through the window, his jaw tightening. We need to move, he said. Now. Daniel nodded. Take them to the car. Aisha hesitated. Where? Somewhere safe, Daniel replied. Just for tonight. The word safe felt strange in her ears. Safety had always been something she created for herself, not something offered. But she looked down at Malik, then back at Daniel. Okay, she said quietly. They left through the back entrance. The night air felt sharper now, as if the city itself had changed its mind about them. Curtis opened the car door quickly, ushering Aisha and Malik inside. As the car pulled away, Aisha looked back at the community center. The lights glowed softly through the rain-slicked windows. It felt like leaving a piece of herself behind. The ride was silent at first. Then Daniel spoke. I want you to know something. Aisha turned slightly. What? I didn't expect this, he said. I thought the worst thing that could happen was disappointment. And now, she asked. And now, he said, I realized the worst thing would be never knowing. The car stopped at a quiet residential street. A modest house stood behind a tall fence, warm lights glowing inside. This is my guest house, Daniel said. No cameras, no staff, just space. Curtis opened the door. I'll stay nearby, he said, in case. Inside, the house was simple. Clean, Lived in, but not flashy. Aisha felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Malik yawned loudly. Can I sleep? Aisha smiled softly. Yes, baby. She tucked him into a small bed in the guest room, brushing his hair back gently. Within minutes, he was asleep again. When she returned to the living room, Daniel was standing by the window. Phone pressed his ear. I'm not doing interviews, he said firmly. No, not now, and definitely not about her. He ended the call and exhaled slowly. They want a headline, he said. A hero, a villain, something simple. And life isn't simple, Aisha replied. Daniel nodded. That's what I forgot. They sat across from each other in the quiet room. You know, Aisha said after a moment, people are going to assume things. They always do, Daniel replied. They'll say I was lucky, she continued. They won't see the years before today. Daniel leaned forward. Then maybe it's time someone showed them. Aisha stiffened. I didn't do this to teach lessons. No, Daniel said. You did it because it was right. That's why it matters. Aisha looked away. I don't want to be an example. Daniel's voice softened. You already are, whether you want to be or not. Silence settled again. Then Aisha asked a question she had been holding back. What happens tomorrow? Daniel didn't answer immediately. Tomorrow, he said finally, you wake up, you take your son to school. You live your life. And you? She asked. Daniel smiled faintly. I start fixing mine. Aisha studied him. You can't fix everything with money. I know, he said. That's what you taught me. Outside, a phone buzzed again. Curtis's voice came through the speaker Daniel had set down earlier. It's growing, Daniel. People are sharing the story. They're asking questions. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Aisha felt her chest tighten once more. This is getting bigger than us. Daniel opened his eyes and looked at her steadily. Then we decide what it becomes. Aisha's heart beat faster. Because for the first time since this began, she realized the experiment had ended. But a choice far more dangerous than spending money now stood in front of her. And once that choice was made, there would be no going back. Morning came quietly. Aisha woke before the sun, the way she always did. For a few seconds, she didn't recognize the room. The clean lines, the soft light, the unfamiliar stillness. Then memory rushed back, and her chest tightened. She sat up slowly and listened. Silence. No shouting neighbors. No traffic horns. No worry knocking at the door before her eyes were even open. She slipped out of bed and checked on Malik. He was sprawled comfortably on his back, one arm thrown over his head, breathing deep and easy. Aisha watched him for a long moment, letting the simple fact that he was safe sink into her bones. She stepped into the kitchen and froze. Daniel was already there. He stood barefoot at the counter, sleeves rolled up, staring into a mug like it might explain something to him. He looked less like a billionaire this morning, and more like a tired man who had not slept enough. Good morning, Aisha said softly. Daniel turned, surprised. You're up early. Habit, she replied. They stood there for a moment, unsure how to move around each other in the quiet. Finally, Daniel gestured to the coffee pot. I wasn't sure how you take it. Black is fine, she said. He poured her a cup and slid it across the counter, careful not to touch her hand. The small distance between them felt deliberate, respectful. I checked the news, Daniel said quietly. Your name isn't out there. Not yet. Aisha exhaled slowly. Thank you. I meant what I said, he continued. I won't let this turn into something that harms you or Malik. She nodded. I believe you. Daniel studied her. You trust me? Aisha met his eyes. I trust what I've seen. That answer seemed to settle something in him. They sat at the small table, steam rising between them. Outside, birds chirped, unaware of how complicated human lives could be. I've been thinking, Daniel said after a while, about why this spread so fast. Aisha sipped her coffee. Because people like stories where money does something unusual. Yes, he agreed. But more than that, because people are tired of hearing that kindness doesn't exist. Aisha looked down at her cup. Kindness exists. It just doesn't get cameras. Daniel nodded slowly. I want to change that. Her shoulders tensed. Careful. I don't mean with speeches or charity galas. He said quickly. I mean with structure. Quiet support. Things that don't depend on luck or viral moments. Aisha studied him now. You're talking about systems. Daniel's eyes lit slightly. Yes. That's dangerous territory, she said. People don't like systems that remind them of their responsibility. I know, Daniel replied. But I also know I can't unsee what I saw yesterday. Aisha leaned back. And where does that leave me? Daniel hesitated. That's the part I'm still figuring out. Before she could respond, Malik padded into the room, rubbing his eyes. Mommy, he said sleepily, can we have cereal? Aisha smiled. Of course. Daniel reached for the cabinet automatically, then paused. Is this okay? Aisha nodded. You can help. As Malik ate, happily unaware of the weight in the room, Aisha watched Daniel move around the kitchen. He was careful, attentive, almost nervous. You're not used to sharing space like this, she said. Daniel smiled faintly. No, I'm used to controlling it. Life doesn't work that way, Aisha replied. I'm learning, he said. After breakfast, Aisha packed Malik's backpack. Old habits kicked in fast. Daniel watched quietly, then cleared his throat. I arranged a car to take Malik to school, he said. If that's okay. Aisha hesitated. I don't want him feeling different. Daniel nodded. Then I'll cancel it. She shook her head. One day won't hurt. Just no attention. I promise, Daniel said. As Malik put on his shoes, he looked up at Daniel. Are you coming too? Daniel smiled gently. Not today. Malik thought about that, then nodded. Okay. When they left, the house felt larger. Too quiet. Aisha stood near the door, suddenly unsure what came next. I should go home after, she said. Get back to normal. Daniel turned toward her. Is that what you want? Aisha paused. It's what I know. Daniel nodded. Then I won't stop you. She studied his face. But he admitted, I hope this isn't the last time our lives intersect. Aisha considered that. I don't believe in accidents anymore. Daniel smiled slightly. Neither do I. As the door closed behind Malik and the driver, Daniel's phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen, then sighed. They're asking questions, he said. Not about you. About me? Aisha crossed her arms. And how does that feel? Uncomfortable, he admitted. Exposed. Good, she said. That's how growth starts. Daniel laughed quietly. You really don't hold back. I don't have the luxury to, she replied. Daniel sobered. Neither do I. Not anymore. He walked to the window, staring out at the street. They think this story is about generosity, he said. But it's not. Aisha joined him. Then what is it about? Daniel turned to her, his expression serious. It's about accountability, he said. And that scares people more than greed ever will. Aisha felt a chill run through her, because accountability didn't just change stories, it changed power. And once power was questioned, nothing stayed the same. By noon, the city had made up its mind. The story was no longer a rumor. It had become a question people could not stop asking. Daniel stood in his office, jacket folded neatly over the back of a chair he had not sat in all morning. The wall of windows showed the city below. Busy, alive, indifferent. His phone lay face down on the desk, vibrating every few minutes like a pulse he refused to check. Aisha sat on the couch across the room, her hands folded in her lap. She had insisted on returning to her apartment after dropping Malik at school, but Daniel had asked her to stay until things settled. Not as an order, as a request. She had agreed, not because she needed protection, but because she sensed the moment mattered. They're framing it already, Daniel said quietly, finally turning from the window. They want a simple narrative. Aisha raised her eyes. They always do. Some say you're a saint, he continued. Others say you were performing. A few are asking why a billionaire would give a stranger a car in the first place. Aisha nodded slowly. And what are you saying? Daniel hesitated. Nothing. Yet. That's dangerous, Aisha said. Silence gives people room to decide for you. Daniel exhaled. I know. I've used silence my whole life. A knock came at the door. Curtis stepped in, expression serious. There's more, he said. Someone leaked details about your past, Aisha. Her stomach tightened. What kind of details? Old eviction records, assistance applications, photos from years ago, Curtis replied. Nothing false, but nothing kind. Aisha closed her eyes briefly. She had known this was coming. When stories grew legs, they ran through everything. Daniel's jaw tightened. That stops now. You can't stop people from digging, Aisha said quietly. You can only decide what they find. Daniel turned to her. Then tell me what you want them to find. She met his gaze, steady, the truth, not the polished version, the whole thing. Curtis looked between them. That's risky. Yes, Aisha agreed, but it's honest. Daniel studied her face. They'll judge you. They already do, she replied. At least this way they won't get to invent me. A long silence followed. Then Daniel nodded. Okay. He picked up his phone. I'll make a statement, he said. Not about the card. About why I did it. And why what you did mattered. And my name? Aisha asked. Daniel shook his head. Only if you say so. She thought of Malik, of school mornings and packed lunches, of a life she was still trying to keep simple. No, she said. Let them talk about actions, not faces. Daniel smiled faintly. That might be the most powerful thing you've done yet. The statement went out an hour later. It was short, calm, unusual. Daniel spoke about trust, about assumptions, about how money revealed character, not created it. He spoke about systems that failed people long before they ever needed help. He did not name Aisha. He did not claim credit. The reaction was immediate. Some praised him. Some mocked him. Some demanded more. Aisha watched the numbers climb on his screen, feeling strangely distant from it all. This was not her world. It never had been. I should go, she said finally. Daniel looked up. Now? Yes, she said. Malik will be out of school soon. He needs me. Daniel nodded. I'll have Curtis take you. I'll take the bus, she replied. I need to feel normal again. He didn't argue. At the door, she paused. Daniel. Yes. You asked me once why I didn't take everything and disappear, she said. He nodded. I didn't disappear, she continued, because disappearing doesn't heal anything. Staying does. Daniel swallowed. Then stay, he said quietly. Not here, just in this. Aisha considered that. We'll see. Outside, the city welcomed her back with noise and movement and indifference. Aisha boarded the bus, sat by the window, and let the familiar rhythm steady her breathing. At Malik's school, he ran into her arms, laughing about something small and wonderful. She listened. She always listened. Back at her apartment, she cooked dinner with what she had bought the day before. The fridge was full, the cupboard stocked. The weight of survival had eased, just enough to let her breathe. As Malik slept that night, Aisha sat alone at the kitchen table. Her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. They're asking what comes next. Aisha stared at the screen. She typed back slowly. That's the wrong question. A moment passed. Then what's the right one? Daniel replied. Aisha looked around her small kitchen, at the chip table, at the quiet strength it had taken to keep standing. Who are you willing to become when no one is watching? She set the phone down. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, Aisha knew something had shifted again, because the story was no longer about 20 hours. It was about what happened after the clock stopped. The next morning did not feel dramatic. That was what unsettled Aisha the most. No cameras waited outside her building. No strangers whispered her name. The hallway smelled the same. The stairs creaked the same way. And the city moved on as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Life had a way of doing that. She walked Malik to school like always, holding his hand, listening to him talk about spelling words and a classmate who borrowed his pencil. She smiled, nodded, responded in the right places. But inside her, something felt different. Not lighter, stronger. After dropping Malik off, Aisha didn't rush home. She sat on a bench across the street, watching parents leave, watching teachers wave. For the first time in a long while, she was not thinking about what bill came next or what might go wrong tomorrow. She was thinking about choice. Her phone vibrated. Daniel, I didn't sleep much. The message read, I keep replaying everything you said. Aisha stared at the screen for a moment before replying. That usually means you're thinking about things you avoided before. The response came quickly. Yes, and I don't like what I see. She allowed herself a small smile. Growth is uncomfortable. She typed back. If it feels easy, it's probably shallow. Several minutes passed before another message arrived. I met with my board this morning. Aisha's fingers paused. And they want to turn this into a campaign. Daniel wrote. A foundation launch. My name on everything. Aisha felt a familiar tightening in her chest. What do you want? She replied. There was a longer pause this time. I want to do it quietly, Daniel finally wrote. But they say, quiet doesn't change systems. Aisha leaned back against the bench, closing her eyes briefly. They're wrong, she typed. Quiet doesn't change systems fast, but it changes people deeply. And people are what systems are made of. Daniel didn't respond right away. Aisha stood and began to walk home. When she reached her apartment, she noticed something unusual. An envelope taped to her door. Her name was written neatly across the front. Her heart skipped. She tore it open carefully. Inside was a notice from the housing authority. Her hands shook as she read it once, then twice, then a third time. Her rent balance had been cleared beyond what she had paid. The account showed a credit, enough to cover months. Aisha's breath caught. This wasn't from her spending. She knew that immediately. Her phone buzzed again. I hope you don't see this as crossing a line. Daniel's message read. I didn't announce it. I didn't attach my name. I just remembered what stability feels like. Aisha sat down slowly, the paper slipping from her fingers. You didn't ask, she typed. No, Daniel replied. But you taught me that sometimes help shouldn't be loud. Tears welled in her eyes, not from gratitude alone, but from something deeper. Respect. She typed back carefully. Thank you, but understand this. I won't become dependent. I know, Daniel replied. That's why I did it. Later that afternoon, Aisha attended a small meeting at the community center. Nothing official, just volunteers talking about needs. Food shortages, a broken heater, children who needed school supplies. She listened more than she spoke. When the meeting ended, the director pulled her aside. We received an anonymous donation, the woman said. Enough to keep us running for the rest of the year. Aisha's chest tightened again. She knew. That evening, Daniel sat alone in his office, staring at the city lights. His phone buzzed constantly, but he ignored most of it. His assistant knocked softly. They're pressuring you, she said. They want answers. Daniel nodded. They'll have to wait. He picked up his phone and typed one message. I did something today that won't make headlines. Aisha replied a few minutes later. Then you're doing it right. Daniel leaned back, closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt unsure about the future. And for the first time, that uncertainty didn't terrify him, because something had shifted inside him that money could not buy and could not undo. Aisha stood at her kitchen window that night, watching the streetlights flicker on. Malik slept peacefully in the next room, his belly full, his dreams untroubled. She held the notice in her hands one last time before folding it neatly and placing it in a drawer. She did not celebrate. She did not cry. She whispered a quiet promise to herself instead. This help would not end her journey. It would anchor it. And somewhere across the city, Daniel Whitmore stared at his reflection in glass, realizing that the 20 hours had not tested Aisha at all. They had tested him. And the results were still unfolding. The city did not wait for anyone to finish changing. By the end of the week, Daniel's life looked the same from the outside and completely different on the inside. Meetings still filled his calendar. Numbers still moved across screens. Decisions still demanded his attention. But something had shifted in how he listened. He no longer spoke first. In one meeting, an executive praised the anonymous donations, calling them excellent reputation insurance. Daniel looked up slowly. "That's not what they are," he said. The room went quiet. "What do you mean?" the man asked carefully. Daniel folded his hands on the table. "If we do good only to protect our image, then we are not doing good. We're buying silence." Several people exchanged uneasy glances. "That's not how business works," someone said. Daniel nodded. "Then maybe business needs to learn." After the meeting, Daniel stood alone in his office, staring at the city again. For years, this view had made him feel powerful. Now it made him feel responsible. Across town, Aisha's days had fallen back into a familiar rhythm, but with subtle differences that mattered. She woke early, made breakfast, walked Malik to school. She went to work, cleaned offices, smiled at people who rarely noticed her. But she moved differently now. Straighter, calmer. She no longer carried the constant fear of collapse in her chest. Stability had given her something precious, mental space. And in that space, ideas began to grow. At the community center, Aisha started staying after meetings, not to lead, just to help organize, to listen to women who reminded her of herself from months ago. She didn't offer speeches. She offered presence. One evening, a young mother pulled her aside. "How did you get out?" the woman asked quietly. Aisha shook her head. "I didn't get out. I stood up. There's a difference." The woman frowned. "But you had help." "Yes," Aisha said. "And one day, so will you. But until then, you keep going." Word spread, not online, but in whispers, about a woman who didn't pretend she had all the answers, about someone who understood struggle without judging it. Aisha never mentioned Daniel. She didn't need to. Meanwhile, Daniel began visiting places he had never stepped into before without cameras or announcements. Shelters, schools, clinics. He listened to stories without interrupting, without promising fixes he hadn't thought through. One afternoon, he sat in his car outside the care facility where his father lived. For 10 minutes, he didn't move. Then he opened the door. His father was sitting by the window again. Daniel pulled up a chair and sat down quietly. "I'm here," he said. The old man turned slowly, recognition flickering. "You came back," he whispered. "Yes," Dan replied. "And I'm not leaving so quickly this time." They didn't talk much that day. They didn't need to. That night, Daniel sent Aisha a short message. "I visited him again." She replied a few minutes later. "Good." Another pause. "He asked about you." Aisha stared at the screen, surprised. "What did you say?" She typed. "That you reminded him of what mattered," Daniel replied. Aisha set the phone down, her chest tight. She had never intended to leave marks on people like this. But she was learning that kindness did not ask permission before it changed things. The following week, Malik came home excited. "Mommy," he said, dropping his backpack, "my teacher says we're having a career day." "That's nice," Aisha replied, smiling. "What do you want to be?" Malik thought hard. "Someone who helps." Aisha knelt and hugged him tightly. Daniel received another message that same evening, this one from his board. They wanted a decision: public launch or quiet work, brand or backbone. Daniel read the message twice. Then he typed one sentence: "We move quietly. Anyone who disagrees is free to leave." It was the most honest decision he had made in years. Later that night, Daniel stood at his window again, phone in hand. "You once asked me who I was willing to become when no one was watching." He wrote to Aisha. "I think I finally know the answer." She read the message slowly before replying. "Good. Just remember, becoming is something you have to choose every day." Daniel smiled. Across the city, two lives continued forward, separate, steady, changed. Not because of a card, not because of 20 hours, but because one moment of trust had cracked open truths neither of them could ignore anymore. And the real test was still ahead. Change rarely announces itself. It settles in quietly, rearranging things while people are busy looking elsewhere. For Aisha, the change showed up in small moments. The way she no longer jumped when her phone rang. The way she could buy groceries without calculating every item twice. The way Malik slept through the night without sensing her fear. Yet stability brought its own questions. One afternoon, after work, Aisha sat at the small kitchen table with a notebook she had bought weeks earlier and barely touched. She opened it now, pen resting between her fingers. For years, survival had been her only plan. Now she had room to imagine more. She wrote one sentence at the top of the page. What comes next? She stared at it for a long time. Across town, Daniel faced a different version of the same question. The boardroom was quieter than usual. A few chairs were empty. The ones who had left did so quickly, unable to accept a future where generosity did not come with applause. Daniel stood at the head of the table, hands resting flat on the polished surface. This isn't a rebellion, he said calmly. It's a correction. One executive frowned. You're risking profit. Daniel nodded. I know. And control, another added. Daniel met her gaze. That too. Silence followed. Finally, one man cleared his throat. If this fails... Daniel interrupted gently. Then we learn. But if we don't try, we already know the outcome. The meeting ended without applause, without congratulations. Daniel preferred it that way. That evening, Daniel visited the care facility again. His father was asleep when he arrived, breathing shallow but steady. Daniel sat beside him, holding his hand lightly. I'm still figuring things out, Daniel whispered. But I think I can finally understand what you were trying to teach me. The old man stirred slightly, fingers tightening around Daniel's. It was enough. Meanwhile, Aisha attended a community meeting she hadn't planned to speak at. She sat near the back, listening as women talked about childcare, transportation, job training. The same problems, the same gaps. When the room fell quiet, someone asked, Does anyone have ideas? Aisha surprised herself by raising her hand. I don't have solutions, she said slowly, but I have experience. Heads turned. She spoke carefully, choosing honesty over confidence. She talked about how one stable month could change a family's future, how dignity mattered as much as money, how trust could not be replaced by forms and policies. When she finished, no one clapped, but several women nodded. After the meeting, the director approached her. Would you consider helping us design a support plan? Something practical, something led by people who've been here. Aisha hesitated. I've never done anything like that, she said. The woman smiled. Neither have most people who end up changing things. Aisha went home that night with her mind buzzing. She found Malik at the table, drawing carefully with new crayons. What are you making? She asked. A house, he said, with lots of windows. Why so many windows? Aisha asked. So people can see inside and know it's safe, Malik replied. Aisha felt her throat tighten. That night, she messaged Daniel. I think I'm being pulled into something. He replied quickly. So am I. It's scary, she wrote. Good, Daniel answered. That usually means it matters. Days turned into weeks. Aisha began working part-time at the center, helping structure a program focused on short-term stability, not charity, not rescue. Breathing room. Daniel quietly funded pilot efforts without branding, without press releases. He read every report, asked uncomfortable questions, accepted criticism. They did not meet often. They did not need to. Their conversations were brief but meaningful. Questions, reflections, warnings. One evening, Daniel sent a message that made Aisha pause. Do you ever wonder why I chose you? She thought about it before responding. Yes, she typed, but I think the real question is why you listened. There was a long pause. You're right, Daniel replied, and I'm still learning how. Aisha closed her notebook that night. Her earlier question answered in a way she hadn't expected. What came next wasn't certainty. It was purpose, and purpose, she was learning, did not need permission to grow. Purpose as a way of testing itself. Just when things began to feel steady, life introduced resistance. For Aisha, it arrived in the form of doubt, not from strangers, not from critics online, from herself. She stood in the small office at the community center, staring at a whiteboard filled with notes and half-formed plans. Childcare rotations, emergency rent buffers, job skill partnerships. Everything looked sensible on paper, yet her chest felt tight. Who was she to help design systems? She had no degree, no title, no official authority, just experience. The director noticed her hesitation. "You're quiet today," the woman said gently. Aisha nodded. "I'm afraid of getting it wrong." The director smiled softly. Everyone who's ever mattered was. That night, Aisha walked home slower than usual. The city lights flickered above her, and the old familiar voice crept in. What if this falls apart? What if people get hurt? What if you disappoint them? She unlocked her apartment and found Malik at the table doing homework. "Mommy," he said without looking up, "do you think people can change?" Aisha paused. "Why do you ask?" "My teacher says some people don't," he replied, "but I think they can." Aisha sat beside him. "I think so, too. But it takes work," Malik added seriously. She smiled. "Yes, it does." Across the city, Daniel faced his own test. One of the pilot programs had failed. Not quietly. A partner organization misused funds. Nothing illegal, but careless. The kind of mistake that critics waited for. Emails poured in. Advisors urged him to pull back, to pause, to protect what he had built. Daniel sat alone in his office long after everyone left, the city dark beyond the glass. Failure used to terrify him. Now it angered him, not because of the loss, but because it revealed how fragile good intentions could be without accountability. He picked up his phone and typed to Aisha. "Something broke today." She replied a few minutes later. "Tell me what you learned." Daniel stared at the screen, surprised by the question. "That money moves faster than values," he wrote, "and that trust needs structure." "Good," Aisha replied. "That means you're paying attention." The next morning, Daniel did something unexpected. He didn't end the program. He rewrote it. More oversight, clear boundaries, local leadership, fewer assumptions. When his advisors warned him about backlash, Daniel answered calmly, "If this only works when it's easy, then it was never real." Meanwhile, Aisha faced a quieter challenge. One of the women she had been mentoring stopped coming to meetings, then missed rent again, then disappeared. Aisha blamed herself immediately. She searched shelters, asked quietly, left messages. Days later, the woman finally returned, ashamed, defensive, exhausted. "I messed up," the woman said, eyes downcast. "I thought I could handle it alone." Aisha sat across from her, heart heavy. "I didn't fail you," the woman continued. "I just wasn't ready." Aisha felt something loosen inside her. Helping wasn't about control. It was about presence. That realization steadied her more than any success ever could. Weeks passed. The programs adjusted. Some succeeded. Some struggled. None were perfect. Daniel visited less, trusting the systems to speak for themselves. Aisha stepped back when needed, learning that leadership sometimes meant letting others lead. One evening, Daniel visited the care facility again. His father was weaker now, quieter. Daniel sat beside him, holding his hand. "I'm trying to do better," Daniel said softly. "Not louder, just better." The old man's eyes opened slightly. "You finally stopped running," he whispered. Daniel swallowed hard. "I think so." That night, Daniel sent Aisha a message he had been thinking about for days. "Do you think change lasts?" She replied without hesitation. "Only if people keep choosing it when it's inconvenient." Daniel read the message twice. Then he closed his phone and sat with the truth of it, because both of them now understood something deeply. The card, the money, the 20 hours. Those had only been the opening question. The real story was about what happened when no one was counting the time anymore, and the answer was still being written. Time slowed in ways neither of them expected, not because life became easier, but because it became fuller. Aisha noticed it first in Malik. He laughed more freely now, asked fewer questions that came from worry. He talked about the future, like it was something waiting for him, not something that might disappear. One evening, as Aisha folded laundry, Malik sat on the floor beside her. "Mommy," he said, "are we poor anymore?" Aisha paused, holding one of his shirts. "We don't have a lot," she said carefully, "but we have enough, and we're okay." Malik nodded, thinking hard. "I like okay." Aisha smiled. So, did she? At the community center, the program they had built began to stand on its own. Not perfectly, but steadily. Women help women. Information traveled faster than fear. Small successes replaced big promises. Aisha stopped being called for every problem. At first, that scared her. Then she realized it meant something was working. She was no longer the center. She was part of the circle. Daniel felt that shift too. For the first time in his adult life, people around him disagreed openly, without fear. They challenged his ideas, questioned his assumptions, asked him to explain himself. And instead of shutting it down, he listened. One afternoon, Daniel sat in a meeting where a young manager said, "We don't need more money here. We need patience." Daniel leaned back and nodded. "Then let's start there." His assistant noticed a change. "You're different," she said later. Daniel smiled faintly. "I hope so. But change always comes with loss." Daniel's father's health declined quickly. The call came late one night. By the time Daniel arrived at the care facility, the room was quiet. Too quiet. He sat beside the bed, holding a hand that no longer squeezed back. "I came back," Daniel whispered. "I stayed." There was no answer. Daniel did not cry immediately. He simply sat there, breathing, letting the weight of it settle. The next day, he handled the arrangements quietly. No announcements, no press, just respect. And without telling anyone, Daniel used part of his own money to expand the fund Aisha had created, ensuring others would not have to choose between dignity and survival, even in death. When Aisha heard, she sat down slowly. She did not message him right away. She waited, then she wrote only this: "I'm sorry, and I see you." Daniel read the message late that night. It was enough. The funeral was small. Daniel stood at the back, unnoticed, watching as people came and went. There was no speech about legacy, no mention of success, just quiet goodbyes. As he walked out, Daniel felt something release inside him. Not grief, forgiveness. Days later, Daniel and Aisha met again for the first time in weeks. Not in an office, not at a center, on a simple park bench, watching children run. Malik kicked a ball nearby, laughing loudly. They sat side by side, comfortable in the silence. "Thank you," Daniel said finally. "For what?" Aisha asked. "For not letting that day be the best thing that ever happened to me," he replied. Aisha smiled softly. "It was never meant to be." They watched Malik for a moment. "You know," Daniel said, "people still ask me about the card." Aisha raised an eyebrow. "What do you tell them?" "That it was never really mine," Daniel replied. "It was just my turn to pass it along." Aisha nodded. "That sounds right." The sun dipped lower in the sky. Life moved forward around them, and both of them felt it. The ending was close. Not the end of struggle, not the end of work, but the end of a chapter that began with 20 hours and grew into something far bigger than either of them had imagined. One final truth remained, and it would be faced soon. The story did not end with applause. It ended with quiet. Months later, the city looked the same to most people. Traffic still crawled. Bills still arrived. People still hurried past one another with their heads down. But for Aisha, quiet had become something new. It was no longer the silence of fear. It was the silence of stability. She woke before dawn as always, but now she sat for a moment on the edge of the bed, breathing, listening to Malik's steady sleep. The apartment felt lived in, not temporary. The fridge stayed full. The calendar on the wall had plans written in ink, not pencil. After dropping Malik at school, Aisha walked to the community center, not because she was needed urgently, but because she chose to be there. She checked in, listened, offered guidance when asked, and stepped back when she wasn't. The program no longer carried her name. That mattered to her. Women were helping women. Systems were holding. When something broke, It was fixed without panic. One afternoon, a new volunteer asked her quietly, "Why do you do this?" Aisha thought for a moment before answering. "Because someone once trusted me when they didn't have to," she said. "And I learned that trust grows best when you don't try to own it." Across the city, Daniel Whitmore sat in an office that looked the same, but felt different. The walls no longer displayed awards. He had taken them down. In their place were notes, reminders, and questions he had written to himself. Who is this helping? Who decides? Who gets left out? He no longer chased recognition. He chased alignment. The systems he supported were quieter now, smaller, stronger. Some investors left. Others stayed. Daniel accepted both outcomes without resentment. One evening, Daniel stood in the care facility hallway one last time, outside the room that had once belonged to his father. It was empty now, clean, waiting for someone else's story. Daniel placed his hand on the doorframe briefly, then turned away. He did not need to return anymore. Later that week, Daniel and Aisha met again in the park. Not for a meeting, not for a decision, just to sit. Malik played nearby, kicking a ball with other children. His laughter carried easily through the air. Daniel watched him for a moment. "He looks happy." "He is," Aisha said, "and safe." Daniel nodded. "That's the real wealth, isn't it?" "Yes," she replied, "and it's fragile. That's why it matters." They sat in silence again. Then Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out something small. A card. Not black, not metal, just paper. He handed it to her. "What's this?" Aisha asked. "An account number," Daniel said. "Not for you, for the program." Aisha shook her head. "Daniel." "No speeches," he said gently. "No announcements. No conditions." She studied him carefully. "Why?" "Because I don't want this to depend on me," he replied. "I want it to outlast me." Aisha nodded slowly. "Then it will." Daniel smiled. "You're sure?" "Yes," she said, "because it already has." The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the grass. "Do you ever think about that day?" Daniel asked quietly. "The card, the 20 hours. Aisha smiled faintly. "Sometimes." "What do you think about?" he asked. "I think about how scared I was," she said, "and how that fear didn't get to decide who I became." Daniel nodded. "It didn't decide who I became either." They stood as Malik ran toward them, breathless and smiling. "Mommy," he called. "Can we go home?" Aisha smiled. "Yes, baby." Daniel watched them walk away, then turned in the opposite direction. There was no dramatic goodbye, no promise of more, just understanding. That night, Aisha tucked Malik into bed and sat alone at the kitchen table, the same table where fear once lived. She thought about the card, the money, the trust, and finally, she understood the truth completely. The billionaire had not given her a credit card to test her character. He had given it to confront his own. And what she did in those 20 hours did not leave him in tears because of generosity. It left him in tears because it reminded him of something he had forgotten, that people are not changed by money. They are revealed by it. Aisha turned off the light and went to bed, her life steady, her future open. And somewhere in the city, Daniel Whitmore did the same. The story had ended, but what it began would last.